Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. On the show today is Brockton McKinney, the writer of the Ehmm theory. Brockton, welcome to Comic Culture.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.
I had the opportunity to read through Ehmm theory, and I just wanted to ask a couple of different questions. Where did the idea come from?
I think we drew a lot of the inspiration from our childhood being 80s kids, kind of coming up with those killer movies, Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all that stuff, and the weird obscure stuff, Ghoulies and Munchies and all that. We love that element of pop culture, and when we got a chance to kind of do our own thing, we wanted to smash it all up together, and the idea was that nothing was off the board. You could come up with something and it made sense to us, then we'd put it in the book.
Well, it's interesting. I'd never thought of that while I was reading it, but it is very much like an 80s movie. If you were watching The Goonies or something, where anything, like you say, anything could happen, where it could have elements of being sort of that teen angst to being, wild adventures and getting chased by pirates.
Sure.
We were talking before we started taping how your opening scene is the lead character having to fight off a horde of zombie little people dressed as circus clowns.
Yeah. We that scene was definitely going to take place in the book. We already knew, but once we started messing around with it, and Larkin Ford, who's one of the co-creators and artists, he sent me over some sketches of the little people as the zombie clowns, and I was like, oh, that's how we're opening the book. That's it right there. But yeah, that's thank you so much, a huge compliment about the Goonies thing, and definitely we didn't want to be too heavy-handed with it, to where when you read it, you felt like, oh, this is a rehash of some 80s something. But I do think you're right. If you go back and look at it, it's got an 80s feel to it that kind of makes you feel warm when you read it.
It's interesting too, and I sort of lament today's youth will never get a movie as compelling as a Goonies, because it has to be a lot more family friendly.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's things you can do, and that was the thing too, is that we weren't going to pull any punches, because we were the kids who stayed up, past 11 o'clock when our parents told us not to, and watched HBO and saw Nightmare on Elm Street and scared the hell out of ourselves, and so we wanted to put those elements in there too, and make sure it wasn't going to be an all ages book so much as it was going to be a book for people who just love all that kind of pop culture stuff and came up around that time period.
And it is interesting because I could see a teenager enjoying that book, but you do have a few four-letter words.
Yeah.
But again, in an 80s movie, you always had a few.
You did. You absolutely did. And it was the way we talked when we were kids that age. The protagonist names are Gabriel and Mr. Whispers, and Mr. Whispers is a talking kitten. And so a lot of the ways that I would write those characters is think about myself and my best friends, the way we talked, and like how would it have been if we discovered these zombie little people, that had dressed as circus clowns. What would we say? And so that's kind of how I would write those two characters. And we were known to drop F-bombs and that kind of stuff, behind the house, hiding out. And so I knew it kind of had to be in the book. And Dave Dwanch, who is the creative director at Action Lab Entertainment, he let us go with it. He said, yeah, man, that makes sense. We're gonna move it to the Danger Zone lineup, which is their sort of mature imprint, and let you run with it.
Well, now we're talking about Action Lab, and that's an independent publisher. And what I think is interesting is that unlike Marvel or DC, the creators own their own characters and they can control where the stories go. How did that help you develop the storyline and the book that you put out?
They were nothing, and have been, and continue to be nothing but supportive. They're great bosses. When we initially submitted Ehmm theory to them, we had 2 issues almost fully done that were black and white to show them as a preview, and then I had this history that I had written, because the book sort of starts in the middle of Gabe's life, and I knew what his parents had done and all this other stuff, really way too much information. And so they said, well, hey, what else have you got? And I said, let me send you this 300,000 word thing, and they got it, and they were like, all right, you know what, man, if you know what you're doing, we're going to let you run with it. And that was it. There have been just a very few times where they were like, can we snip this up? Can we clean this? Or do you want to do this here? Can we compact this from 5 to 4? That kind of thing, but rarely any kind of editorial interference at all, and I truly thank them for that.
And let's talk about the creative process a little bit. Now, you wrote the book, and I was just wondering how the collaboration worked with the art team.
Well, Larkin Ford and myself been friends for years, and both worked on different independent books for a long time, other people's stuff. And so we always said, we should get together and do something and make some happen. And I had sort of just the initial idea of Gabe and the cat being able to talk. He originally floated. There was like a whole thing behind it where he was like a ghost that kind of floated. And so I sent it over to Larkin, and he said, oh, I really like this, man. Let me do some sketches. He sent back sketches, and we worked just hand in hand. I'd do 5 pages of script and send it over, and he'd be like, I love it. Is there any way you can work in a cybernetic crab? And I'd be like, oh, yes, okay, sure. And so we'd start working with that. And he, at the time, lived in Asheville, North Carolina. I lived in Chapel Hill. And so we would make the trip back and forth. It's about a 4-hour drive. And we'd make the trip back and forth and hang out with each other and just sit there and sketch stuff on napkins and talk about it and laugh about it and say, can we put this in there? And then I would go back with this giant stack of napkins and papers and all kinds of other stuff and sort of craft the scripts out of that.
So this was a true collaborative process where it wasn't you wrote a full script and then just handed it off to an artist that you located on, artistlist.com or something.
Right, yeah, no, it was, and certainly there's nothing wrong with that, and I have done that, but this was one of those times where we wanted to do something together, and his input was just hugely important. And once I had amassed all the stuff we wanted to do, I could write full scripts without us having to get back together and really go over everything, because we'd come up with an idea, and I knew these 3 first arcs that we wanted to accomplish, so I could just knock the scripts out and send them to him, and then he would say, yeah. And the robot crab is one of them. I originally had it as a character named Robertopus, who's a robot bear octopus, and Larkin loved it, but he thought maybe we should save it for a little bit later since it was such a big reveal. And the crab kind of came out of that. We just started talking about animals that we would like to see cybernetic, and he was like, I just really love drawing crabs. I was like, well, let's make a big cyborg crab and call it Crab Board, man. And he was like, oh, it sounds great. And so we threw that in there, and that's how Crab Board came into issue 2 of M Theory, is just by us going back and forth, and Robertopus just got moved to issue 4.
When we come back, we'll continue talking to Brockton McKinney about M Theory. So just stay tuned right there, and we'll be right back.
Hey, this job looks perfect. It says you need people skills?
Check.
Driver's license?
Check.
And a high school diploma or GED.
Skip the drama. Get your GED.
I got that.
You are good to go.
Take that first step towards a better future and sign up for free classes now at yourged.org.
Hart, what's going on?
I'm leaving.
Why? What did I do?
Not enough. The pressure's too much. I quit.
I get it. I can do better. Just please don't leave.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
Danse, balance, suis la cadence, ondule bien tes hanches, au bal du dimanche. Danse, que la fête commence, dans ma belle robe blanche, je suis ton chou.
You didn't give up on sex. Don't give up on birth control either. There are more methods than you think. Find yours at bedsider.org.
Often, books are just tossed around. However, over 6 million in North Carolina, 30 million in America, and 774 million globally, all have one thing in common: illiteracy.
if you store your guns properly.
I'll feel safer when I'm playing outside.
Safer when walking home.
And I won't have to tell my kids, this isn't a drill.
Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. Always lock it up.
Welcome back to Comic Culture. We're talking to Brockton McKinney, writer of M Theory. Brockton, before we took the break, we were talking about the creative process and how you and your art partner were able to put everything together. How did you get Action Lab to publish this book?
I actually kind of had a little bit of an insider heads up. Jeremy Whitley, who's a good friend of mine and writes the book Princeless for them, he said Action Lab is currently getting ready to start a mature imprint lineup because they've got all these all ages books and they have a few other books that aren't really for kids, and they need to make discern which one is which on the stands. And so he said, I'd been working on M Theory and he'd seen it. He said, you should submit M Theory and see what they think. And another book that I had called Death Curse. And so I kind of I knew right out the gate that they were going to be starting it. So I hit them up early and started working with those guys. Jason Martin and David Dwanch were the guys that you submitted to, and sent it over to them. And again, it was black and white at the time because we were just doing preview editions. And they really liked it. We started working together on stuff. They did want it to be in color, and I luckily worked in the studio with a guy named Jason Strutt, who not only colors but also does pencils, inks, paints, all that. And I said, hey man, you think you want a job coloring M Theory? He was like, yeah, let me give it a shot. And he knocked it out. He's the guy who colored the entire first arc. And then that was that. We started working on the promotion behind it.
And when you put the book together, did you put it out as a collected like trade, or is it just individual issues?
It started out in singles. It came out, issues 1 through 4 came out between May and August, I believe. And then the collected trade came out right after that, about a month after. And then this is October, so not this week, but next week, the first issue of the second volume comes out in stores. Same process, 4 issues, and then it'll be collected into the trade.
And is this out of that large 300,000 word document that you had originally sent over to the folks at Action Lab?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of. I initially envisioned it as an ongoing title that would go, for years. And as I talked to the Action Lab guys, they explained that what works better for them is to do it in small arcs, to do it in increments, so that people can jump on board and then grab the trade and then come back out and pick up the next set as it comes out. So I kind of had to space things down to make sure that the comic book you could read issues 1 through 4 and be happy with it and be like, that's enough, but still there's a little bit of like cliffhangeriness to get you to come back around for this second volume. So the first 3 volumes are the first 12 issues, and that's the original year that I intended the series to be.
And when the new arc starts, the story is going to pick up sort of where it left off at the end of the first arc, as you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, it comes right in. There's like a couple of weeks have passed, and so it jumps right back into it again. We've got a big catch-up page for you at the beginning of it, telling you what went on and kind of reminding you what's up, and then we jump right into the business. One of our favorite new characters, Mr. Everything, is a time-traveling assassin monkey who is a huge part of this arc and has a giant role in the entire M Theory universe. So we're looking forward to see what people think about Mr. Everything.
Well, I noticed that you have many characters who start off with Mr. Something, and you have a lot of abbreviations, like the God Team and
oh yeah,
Tammy.
Yeah, Tammy. Lots of acronyms. Yeah, they make a note of it when Whispers and the Imp are going at it, yelling at each other in issue 2. We had Whispers throw a little thing in there where he was like, "Man, you guys really love acronyms," just because we were like, we do love them, but that was the thing. We love that. We love the idea of putting Mr. in front of animals' names. It always killed us when we were kids, and so we're continuing the tradition in M Theory.
So it's sort of like I guess a little inside joke that you just incorporate because you get sort of a kick out of it, which is, I think, the best way to do a lot of these things.
Yeah, we feel like that everybody else feels the same way. Like if you say Mr. Dookie, people are gonna laugh. It's just like there's something inherently funny about calling someone Mr. something. Mr. Uncle, that's weird. People like that, you know. It's like putting the Mr. in front of something. Mr. Weasel, you're like, who is Mr. Weasel? That sounds pretty funny. Why was his name Weasel, and why do people call him Mr.? And so then we go into that. You know, it always makes us giggle, so we put it in.
Well, that is important. Is always having the fun. Now, when you put something out in a trade form, do you ever get the temptation to maybe tweak something that you thought didn't come out quite right, or change a line of dialogue here or there before it comes out in the collected volume?
Yeah, it has to be something really major for us to go back and do it, because you kind of feel like you might be George Lucasing it, you know, and just being like, I gotta fix everything. And sometimes those little things are what people like about it. When we had the black and white version, the 2 preview issues, we did change several scenes before it went to print, both dialogue and art even, where we went back and read. I was like, you know what, we could do this a little bit better. That's the only time we really messed around with it. And even with the second volume, I feel like we had a better idea of how to tell our stories and what we wanted to do with it. We already introduced the characters, so that made it easier. And I'll go through one last time after Larkin has finished the pencils and inks, after the lettering has been done, and after our new colorist, Amy Hanchy, has done the coloring, and I'll read over it and maybe make a couple of dialogue tweaks, just because you read it and you're like, it doesn't work panel to panel the way I wanted it to. That's weird. And you can go back and fix those little things. But once it's in print and people have already read it, I feel like, all right, man, I have my shot. You know, like it goes to trade the way it's supposed to be.
Well, that's another question that I had. A lot of times with the bigger publishers, like let's say Marvel putting out X-Men every month, if an artist is late, the book is late, and if Marvel has a problem, getting the book delivered on time, it's no big deal because Marvel's so large. How does Action Lab handle something like that? I'm assuming that you have to do most of the work ahead of time before they'll solicit it?
Absolutely. They had already dealt with all that stuff before we came on board. So we were like, well, we got issue 1 and 2, put it out. And they were like, no. You're going to finish 3 and 4. You're going to finish 3 and 4, and then we'll start soliciting for issue 1. So each arc, each self-contained arc has to be finished before we even start the solicitation. So, you know, our 4th issue of this new volume was already done long before they said, okay, here's what's coming out.
And when they schedule the release of the book, do you have any input on, it would be perfect if you released it at this time, or is it just something where the books can kind of just stand at any time of the year? I mean, unless it was a holiday theme or something.
Right, yeah. We've not done any of the holiday themed stuff, and so it's kind of arbitrary for us, like when it comes out. We sort of, wherever we fit in the schedule. They put a lot of books out, so depending on where it would work the best. And it's kind of a race to the finish, where you're like, you want to put out the best work you can, but certainly the sooner you get done, the sooner your arc's going to be solicited through Diamond. So.
And then you get paid, as they say.
And then you get paid. Right, yeah. That's a huge part of it, yeah.
That's true. Now, I'm fortunate enough to teach a screenwriting course here at Pembroke. And one of the things I tell my students is that when you write a story, it's not just the events, it's the characters and how the characters drive the events and how the events drive the characters. And I'm just wondering what sort of approach you take to characters versus plot elements when you write.
I'm a big outline guy. I know a lot of people aren't, but I definitely I have the characters kind of worked out on a whole separate document long before I ever start working on even the events, you know. And so I'll reference that stuff before I'll start an issue or start an arc and read back over everything and remember who the people are. And then once I kind of get rolling, I know who they are. It's easier to write. You can do it. But I definitely refresh it every time I jump back into it. And then as far as the events are concerned, I knew the story we wanted to tell, and it was 3 distinct locations really for each arc. And so I'll take a notebook and scribble down a bunch of stuff that I want to see, that Larkin wanted to see, and then I'll just go about kind of crafting it and seeing how it fits together. Most of the time, if you've done your homework and you've done your outline and you know what you want to do with the arc, stuff sort of fits together. The puzzle pieces hit a little easier than if you just dive into that thing with a blank piece of paper and start tapping away.
It's interesting. I met Terry Moore at a convention in Charlotte recently, and I asked him how he, does his writing. He says, "Oh, I start on the top of the page, and when I'm at the bottom, I put another board up and try and figure out what's going to happen next." And whenever whenever I do anything, it's always, all right, this is what I want to have happen, and then I've got to build up on that, and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah. I'll write the final issue, the big climax long before I ever start issue 1. I kind of want to know where I'm going. It makes me feel comfortable. And again, it's not for everybody. Some people love the organicness of just writing. I do that with dialogue. I'll write dialogue with no format whatsoever. No format whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go back and sort of insert it, where it's supposed to be in the panel by panel. But if I have to do a breakdown for panel by panel, my dialogue usually comes out kind of stinted. So I'll freeform the dialogue, just let it go. Just sit there and type the name, type what they're saying, boom, 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 and get pages and pages of it.
And when you're writing dialogue, how do you approach each character? I mean, you said you have an outline. Does that help you kind of draw the dialogue that would seem natural for that character, or how do you approach it, I guess, is a good question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, I very much think of Gabe and Whispers as myself and my best friend when we were younger, and it's really easy for me to write that dialogue because me and him, we're still, he works in the studio with me to this day. We still laugh about things like Mr. Uncle and stuff like that. So it's real easy for me to write those particular characters. And even a funny thing is, Larkin told me he draws Gabe and Whisper's expressions based on himself and his younger brother, who I know, Hart. He's like, that's kind of the way they interact. So all of us have our little ways to kind of sneak stuff in there. For me, it's finding the people that maybe that have that dynamic, that have that relationship, or kind of act like that person, and hearing their voice in your head.
How do you approach a writing assignment that isn't something that is so close to you, that isn't a story that you want to tell? How do you kind of handle an assignment versus something that you've got a passion for?
It is much harder, I'm sure, as you know. It's one of those things where you just kind of have to bear down and do what needs to be done. This is no joke, I put in headphones and go for a run. I do about 5 miles, and I sit there and I work myself up before I leave. I'm like, listen, man, you got to finish this. You got to figure this out. I know you don't want to do it, but you got to do it. I was like, was it a piranha? I don't know what it is. Like, you got to figure it out. This is it. This is your run. And I'll just like hit the trails with music going and try to work out the story in my head, try to work out the dialogue, and then come back and like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I did it. And sometimes I'm like, man, that was a bust. We'll try again tomorrow. Drawing inspiration from other people's work is huge for me too. Movies, other comic books, kind of just getting, filled up and getting like, oh, all right, I'm stoked now. I'm ready to do this. That'll put you in a better place sometimes on a project that you're not wholeheartedly into.
I had a professor back in the day who told me the best way that he would solve problems when he was writing a screenplay was, I'm going to put it down for a few hours and I'm going to go have lunch and do this, that, or the other thing, run some errands, and then my subconscious will take care of the rest, and then I'll sit down and it'll be there. And I've tried that method. It actually works. I don't have the same results that he did, but...
Right. No, sometimes you just got to walk away for a little bit. Just let it sit. I will absolutely not get stuck with writer's block because I'll just move on to the thing I want to write. If I'm writing a script or I'm writing an outline and I get to a point where I'm like, I'm having trouble for more than 5 minutes, I'm just like, but I can't wait to write the part about the octopus, so I just like jump right down and start blaring through that, and sometimes even that'll jog it for me and get it back where I can hit it. Otherwise, I just leave it alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great advice for the aspiring writer out there, to just write what you want to write at that moment and see if it loosens up the rest of the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, then you can't get stuck. It's like there is something you want to write. There's always something you want to write, so go write it. Like, just don't get stuck. You're putting too much time into it. More than 5 minutes on something where your hands are not moving toward that keyboard. There's something you want to write about, and go ahead and just jump forward and do that part. Whether it be dialogue, scene description, character, whatever it is, go ahead and knock it out. and see what happens when you do that. And a lot of times that you'll be like, well, wait, if this happens, then this has to happen, and you'll go back and be able to do it. Doesn't always work, but for me, I don't get stuck. At least I feel like I'm productive. I got something done. I didn't sit there for an hour staring at the screen.
It's almost like a mini avalanche. Sometimes things just kind of fall into place when you knock out that one little piece and everything just works its way out. And those are those magic moments when it's not work, it's just joy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had one of those. I call them, I can't say it, it's a curse word, but OS moments. So I say there are OS moments where you're like, oh, S, that's it, I did it, oh no, that's it, now we can do it. So when I have those epiphanies, it is, yeah, you're right, it's like just super magical, and you're like, all right, now we can get down to this and knock this stuff out. It happens a lot to me with the running thing, getting out there and just like loosening it up and not concentrating on something that is, directly related to it. I got to watch out. I run the trails. So there's roots, there's rocks, there's a creek, there's a bridge. I'm like trying to, not fall in and not twist my ankle. And that'll kind of let me, very much what you said about just leaving it alone for a while and just let the subconscious go.
Yeah, it's amazing what we are able to achieve when we're not trying.
That's it. Yeah.
Now you had mentioned that sometimes you're inspired by comics, and I'm just wondering what sort of comics you would read.
Oh, wow. I read like 30 to 50 titles a week. I read pretty much everything out there. Marvel, DC, all the independent stuff. My local comic book store here is called Ultimate Comics, and I will literally just go in there on a Tuesday while they're unpacking the books and help them unpack and scan stuff in just so I can see the new stuff that's coming out and talk to those guys. And they'll be like, oh, have you read Outcast? Have you read this? I'm like, no, I haven't really. Have you read that? So they turn me on to all the new stuff, and then I can pick it all up.
Well, I'm being told that we've run out of time, which is amazing because the half hour has just flown by. Brockton, I want to thank you so much for talking to us, and I'd like to thank all of you for watching Comic Culture. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.